remember one of my bosses scheduled a meeting on Valentine's Day.
What I found is when my schedule started to reflect what I said my priorities were, and it was me.
I was the problem.
From a professional soccer career to becoming a driving force in the mortgage industry.
This is my friend Brian Covey. He is a competitor first, and it's always been that way since his professional soccer days. See, through his career, he scaled multiple teams, multiple businesses, generated billions of dollars, and created infinite impact in the process. Brian has mastered the art of cultivating a champion's mindset. He's the founder of Covey Holdings, and the conversations he's having with others are guaranteed to impact you. Do simple better. Welcome back, everybody. You know what we do here by now. We dive in deep. We jump in and we flip the lid of some of the most successful and significant people making impact in this world. And that looks different in every single container that we've interviewed so far. Every person has brought unique insights, yet there's a common thread of the human experience that connects every single one of their stories. Today is no different. This is an individual that I got to meet in the beginning of COVID when I first started getting into podcasting. And he was one of the probably first 50 podcasts of the over 600 that I've now been on of other people's. And we just had an instant connection. It wasn't long after that we got to meet in person for the very first time, which during those COVID years was an absolute gift when you could take the virtual to the in-person, but the connection that existed for this individual and myself, both virtually and in person, remained the same regardless of the environment. He's someone who's reached high levels of success, has been a professional athlete, Division I athlete, has built and scaled multiple teams, multiple businesses, and the most recent one, he took an organization from $245 million to over $2.45 billion in 5 years. Now he's using his voice, his stories to elevate and empower other people, and the conversations he has with others are guaranteed to impact you. Brian, my friend, I am so happy to have you here today.
Dude, what an honor, my friend. And the feeling's mutual. I remember when we first met and we were out at Coach Burt's Lodge and we connected up, and that embrace and that hug. And I was like, I knew your energy in person. We connected over the phone, and it's real. And you're one of those few people that I remember when we came and had lunch together. It's like just a trusted advisor and somebody that I want more Brian in my life. And so I appreciate you, my friend, because it's not often you find people like that you can resonate and click and actually create that space for each other.
Well, I thank you. I fully received that, brother. The feeling is mutual. I've very much enjoyed as we're building our relationship, and this is just the beginning, to be honest. I mean, we're a few years in now, but I already see the congruence and the consistency and the impact we're going to have together for years.
That's right.
And I'm really excited about that. So, I gave a super high level introduction of you based on how I see you and what our relationship is. But the only question that I'm probably consistent with throughout this show is reflecting this one, which is, who are you in your words?
Over the years, I'll be 46 this year, right? And so I was actually just at a lunch date with my wife, and we were talking through this as been married 20 years, right? We got 3 kids, just turned 16, 14, 7. And we were just talking about, man, like, a lot of people don't make it that long, right? And it was this conversation of what we've been through and the storms. And both of our first 2 kids were born in the 07-08 crisis. I was in mortgage and real estate. Like, my job was eliminated. My ability to earn income basically cut off right away. We started thinking through all these things. Lost a job later with a new company, right? And all these things that have happened to us. Like, dude, we've been through a lot together. But the one consistent we talked about was our foundation, our faith. And I share that because for me, family and faith, they go together. And without one, the other typically has trouble. And when those are not aligned and they are not together, that's usually where people are off. And so for me, growing up, my dad was a psychologist and a pastor. That was something huge for me to learn. My mom worked at the city of Memphis. I learned hard work and grit from her. And then my older brother was 5 years older. So I was always chasing my older brother. And that's where I believe competition was bred in me. And so when I tell people about who I am, it's all of those bits and pieces of people that I've had mentors and coaches throughout my life, and sports played a big role. It actually kept me on a path that I think is why I am where I am today, and didn't detour off into some other areas that I could have gone a different road very easily. And it's why today I really take my job as a dad and as a husband very seriously, because without those, no one cares. I don't care about the business success and the other things in life. They're for naught if I don't get the house and my family right. And I'm the first one to tell you it's not perfect, but that's who I want to be. That's who I want to be.
Yeah. You know, I resonate deeply with the conversation about being a husband and father first. As you know, it's the only thing binary in my world, right? And I've more than once walked away from certain things because my family wasn't in the right alignment, or I wasn't in the right alignment to be the father and the husband that they deserved. You know, it's easy to sit here and say that it's a big priority. And I think a lot of people vocalize that. I did for a lot of years, well before my actions actually aligned with my words. You're someone that I've seen a lot of consistency and congruency in your actions and your words for at least the time that I've known you. But give us a little bit of perspective on what being a good father and a good husband means to you.
Well, first off, I would start with, I wasn't always that way. And so early in my career, I was chasing the corporate ladder. I worked in the largest bank in the country at Wells Fargo, and I was chasing that, which meant I had to travel, and I would prioritize work. I would prioritize travel, and I wasn't there as much for our first two kids. And I share with people, our third child, Henry, our 7-year-old, was really a gift, I believe, in that God offered an opportunity, really, I think for me more so than anybody, to go, hey man, you weren't there as much for your first two. You were there, but I wasn't there like what I would have wanted to be. Like if I were to measure myself, there was room for opportunity. And so I really started to learn that 7 years ago deeply, of when Henry was born, was like, okay, we're not just going to talk about this. This isn't like going to be lip service. This is going to be like, this is where I'm going to be. And I've seen that intentionality for me, you know, Brian, and it got down to this word, like everybody talks about this work-life balance, or people talk about balance in their lives, like whatever word you use, like I'm not going to go down the semantics of it. I learned from a mentor during that 7-year period, almost 7 years ago, about integration. And I started to figure out things that, man, you know what, I can go to work out and my kids are now old enough, I can work out with them and have family time. I can take them on trips with me. Last year I spoke in Las Vegas and I took my daughter with me to the trip, and she's there to see me, and I'm with her for a couple of days, right? I started to realize there were opportunities all around me I had not been aware of before. And so to be a great dad, what I'd say is it's making the most of the opportunities. And lately I've been sharing this quite a bit from my heart, of the first time we've experienced, our oldest is 16. Whew, man, our only girl, like that's my baby girl. And now she's driving a car. And I mean, Brian, over the last 2 years, one of my favorite things to do every week was to ride to and from soccer practices with her. Like just the highlight of my day, right? Like I would look forward to it. We'd ride, she'd talk to me, and that's slowly moving away. And I'm realizing, okay, that season, and seasons pass fast. And so we have to be intentional. We have to find ways to be there. And one of the big changes I made a few years ago, that the dads out there, I want to share this lesson because it helped me. I was a coach for a long time with my kids up to a certain age. I made a decision to move into full-time dad. And then secondarily, I am always there to be a coach and to help them. But if I had not made that decision, I'd tried to remain coach. I've seen too many of those relationships not turn out. And so you have that opportunity. I'm dad first, and I tell them that. And then if you want me to coach, play, do all that with you, that's secondarily the role that I play for you. And so I would say being that and being aligned with your partner. You know, Nicole and I talk quite a bit about the things that we want for our kids. It doesn't mean we always agree on it. It's one of those, like, we have conversations. Even on Sunday nights, we plan out our weeks, because I'm not organized enough. I'll be real. Like my calendar every week, if I don't go through it on Sunday and make sure things are in there, I do not remember if someone tells me I need to be there for my kids on Wednesday night. I will forget.
Yeah, me too.
So schedule what matters. And if you say it's a priority, what I found is when my schedule started to reflect what I said my priorities were, that's where I started to really enjoy life again. When it was out of balance, I was fighting myself, and then I was pissed at other people, and it was me. I was the problem. Yeah. And so I had to solve for that.
How did you first come to the realization, and what was your state of observation realizing that you were the problem?
The conflict that resided between, I would say that I was going to be here for this, or I would say that that was the priority, but then when things would come up, my decisions would align up with something different. And that just became a pattern. It was like, okay, well, I got to go do this, right? Like I got to be there on that work trip, or I'm going to lose my job. Like I had that fear for a while, right? Like if I don't go to this meeting, I remember one of my bosses, this is crazy, we still laugh about it, scheduled a meeting on Valentine's Day.
Oof.
You talk about, let's chalk that up to like horrible leadership, not even bad, like horrible. But I went to it, and I would look back now, and today, this Brian would say, no, not going to be there. If that means I lose my job, that means I move on. I'm confident enough now to move forward. And I think that's where the maturity and growth has happened, of knowing what I can say and when to say no to things, to then make space for what matters with the family. Because once you move from scheduling, look, let's be real. During the week, you're going to have things pop up. People want you to do this. They want you to do that. You're going to have times that with 3 kids, look, I can't be at all 3 if they all have something going on the same night. So how do you pick and choose and make sure, and I'll give you one example this year that I started, and Nicole, I'll give her credit for this. Our middle son a lot of times doesn't play as much on the sports side, and so we don't get to see him as much out there competing. Well, he loves to snowboard. We found this out the last couple of years. We went snowboarding. So I took him on a solo trip, which was really our first dude trip, right? So he's 14. And I'm going, man, this is going to be a regular thing. How can we do that more often? And so I share that as an example because, look, I wasn't doing it. Now I've started to incorporate those things in, and I'm finding, one, I loved it. He loved it. It brought us closer. Our relationship since that trip together, Brian, I can just tell you, those are the things that matter, and to make space for that. So I tell you, that's where I've grown. That's where I've learned. And when tension starts to happen, leaning in and making time for that kid or your spouse that's the solution. There's no secret sauce to it. Making time and making it quality.
You know, I resonate really deeply with all of that. I think it's just critically important for us to recognize that so often as parents, it's our presence that matters most. Right? Because through presence, love, leadership, connection, example, all of it can exist if we are able to put ourselves in the present. But the performance-minded selves that we often are don't see it always as the ability to remain in the present because we're so focused on what's next. Where are we going? Those moments with our kids, though, truly are magical. And they can be healing and they can be shaping. You talk about moments that you realize you missed. What's 1 or 2 that you wish you could get back?
I think there are spring breaks and things that I look back and, you've got work and you've got things. I've been pretty fortunate that I made the big games, right? Like I didn't miss anything that I go back and say, man, there's like this one game that I missed that was there. What I would tell you is that having 3 is there's times that I wish I could be like, even this last weekend, right? Like we're going to my son's flag football game, my oldest, and then we're driving across town with my daughter's driving now, right? So she drives us to our youngest soccer game with our youngest 7-year-old, and if I could be in 2 places at once, I would say that's it. But what I would share, although there's not a specific one, what I would tell you is what I would do more of is the workouts together, the individual trips. I have learned the individual trips matter, especially if you have multiple kids. That to me, even if you have one, I would tell you, individual time, just taking my daughter on little dates, right? Going out one-on-one time, I've realized that's what I would change. Because a lot of times I'm there with them. We get home, we're tired, they're all coming in from school, and you think you're having this community time, and that's good, right? That's family time. But what I believe I missed was those opportunities I've learned later is the one-on-one time is where it's at. Just that snowboarding trip with my 14-year-old, like wanting a breakthrough with him and wanting him to have the same relationship. My daughter and I are close. Like, we're very much aligned and we have a relationship because we talk and we ride in the car. I think we've just figured out how to work together, right? And I want that with my middle. And then now I've learned that with my 7-year-old is there's certain things they crave differently. And it's almost like you think about in business, how often have you or we get to know that team member and we know what they like, what they don't like. If I'd slowed down and done that with my kids more often, what kind of memories could I have created? And so I don't think there's any one thing or something I missed that I just go, man, I missed that.
That's fair.
But creating the memories in the moments, that's where it's at.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. You know, it was interesting. I had mentioned to you, we've got a retreat coming up this week, and I was having a quick little meeting yesterday with a new entrepreneur locally that we connected with and just have some resonance with. We were grabbing like 40-minute coffee, and it was in the middle of the day, and he says, what are you doing for the rest of the day? Like, just curious what it looks like. And I know that my wife and I are going to be pouring into these folks in this room, in this house, in this shared space that we have for 3.5 days. And because of the way childcare worked out this time, they actually won't be able to come for any of it just because of how it shook out. Now, I would normally have my kids in the room, but that means I'm not going to see my kids for a few days. So I said to him, I said, well, we've got this huge retreat coming up. I said, so I'm prioritizing the drives with my kids to and from school this week. So as soon as I leave here, I have one meeting at my house and I'm leaving to go get my kids. That's not something that I was able to do for a long time because I always saw them as conflicting or competing time. And because I had the view of balance, and even when I was shifted to the view of integration 10 years ago, integrating to me still meant I've got barriers and containers in different areas of my life that might not overlap. And so I'm really curious, as you've integrated all of this, let's take the business out for a second. What's been more challenging for you in your own growth, being married for over 20 years or being a dad or being specifically a soccer dad?
Oh, I've grown. I would say, man, the struggle that I still face is the no's. What to say no to say yes to the right things. As opportunities, as you grow, anytime you're saying no to one thing, right? Or you're saying yes to one thing, I should say, you're saying no to a lot of things. So I can say yes to one thing.
Yeah.
I'm saying no to a lot of things, and understanding what's the priority in that moment. And I think that's what I'm still learning and growing through right now is even travel, like you mentioned. I've got a couple of speaking events and some conferences and things that people want me to be at. And it's like, man, I'm in that space now where I'm like, I see what it looks like on the other side. I've got friends with kids going to college, and I'm going, there's no time left, Brian. There's no, like, don't miss the moments. And so that's what I'm seeing today. And Nicole and I talked about this. I think the harder part sometimes is, at the end of the day, is being the husband is honestly harder some days, because there's 3 kids. They're always, they need something today. Like, they're not on their own yet. There's nothing there. And the one thing I've always known about Nicole is she would say, prioritize the kids. That's why I married you. I married you because I knew you'd be a great dad. And so I hear that and go, I need to prioritize them, but I need to make sure I give Nicole. And that's why, like, today we had the impromptu lunch date, because we just don't get it that often. We don't plan them enough. And so I realized by pouring into them in the 5 love languages, that's actually one of her love languages I discovered is acts of service. And that's for the kids.
Hey.
And it wasn't acts of service necessarily for her. It was acts of service, me serving and being there for the kids. I was like, man, if I'd learned that earlier, like, what does that actually mean though? Because I think we hear that language and people talk about it. I would have learned that sooner. And so I would say that the husband part a lot of times gets pushed, because with 3 kids, it's the priority. It's who needs what right now. I've worked throughout the day. And then what happens after school, man? We got to take care of the kids. We got to get them everywhere.
Yeah.
By the nighttime, people go to bed at 9 o'clock. You're like, there's nothing left in the tank.
Yeah.
I'd say that's the harder struggle and we talk about this often, it's like getting away for our 20-year anniversary last year. One of the best things we did, getting away and doing things, just little impromptu lunch dates like that don't require as much. Like, all of those require Brian to be more intentional. It's not how I'm wired. I don't see those.
Yeah.
I miss those. And so,
what are you struggling to say no to right now?
Lately it has been more opportunities than I have time, because they're starting to conflict with what I've said my priorities are. And I see that conflict, and I can feel it. Of speaking's been one where this year I'll only speak 4 times. I was probably 10, 12 last year, and intentionally cutting that down, saying, you know what? That just doesn't align up in this season. It just doesn't. My ego would tell me it does, like 100%. It'd be there. But what I've realized is there's really no investment made there that comes back. When I come in my house, my kids don't care that I spoke on a stage with whoever it is, by the way, right? Like, it could be the president of the United States. They don't care.
Yeah, it doesn't matter.
They don't care. And so I started to realize that was me chasing something. And what matters, and what I'm starting to say yes to, I've kind of used this checklist. Is it a legacy play, in the sense of, is it going to be something that I can pass on to my kids in form of like an asset that I can pass on to them? Is it going to be something I can take them on a trip that we can make memories with? Is it going to be something that we go, man, I'm so glad we did that? And so the no's are starting to stack up, quite honestly, more than I ever imagined. And people have talked about this. I've had people tell me, and until you're in that season, with my daughter turning 16, it's almost gotten hypersensitive, Brian, because it's like, there's just not enough time. There's not enough time. With 2 more years left, that's where I need to be, and to make space for those things. That's where being the business leader and the person that wants to go out and be successful and brought up through, corporate culture, it's like, it's still that part of me that I have to quiet to go, that's not who we are anymore. That's not what it lines up.
You talk about the no's that are stacking up, and obviously you've got a very clear vision of this timeline that's ahead of you. And this is where I'm going to challenge you, my friend, just for a second, because you actually didn't give me a specific answer on what you're struggling to say no to right now. You outlined the opportunities and the things that stack up. And by the way, I support all of it, right? You know me. But I want to challenge you to pause and slow down in this moment and really think and identify what is something that you need to say no to in your life right now.
Yeah. So we'll say, as of recent, outside of the speaking, because that was one thing that came this year and said, okay, we're not going to do much of that. I think it's probably going down the path. I think of this as, man, like adding anything to my plate that are extra beyond what I have today. What I mean by that is there might be the best new opportunity that comes, but in this season, saying no almost to anything that comes new, because look, like the Revolution mortgage piece, we've got all the things going there and all that thing. When you said it, what came to my mind was it's almost anything new that comes in right now.
Fair.
Which is hard because my mind went to that just to say, hold on. We have these things here. Adding anything means I'm going to need to subtract because there's only so much of so many hours.
Correct.
There's not anything I want to subtract from what I just shared. Like that's where I want to be. And yeah, that's kind of an epiphany moment of being an expansion guy and a competitive guy. That's like, hold on. So when I was going to say it, I was like, I'm not going to say that because that just sounds like I don't want to grow or don't want to learn. But dude, I would say, and I appreciate you challenging me on that because that's something I want to dig into because I think saying no to all of those going forward is almost counterintuitive to somebody that wants to grow and expand.
It feels like a conflict of self in ways. And here's what I can tell you. First of all, thank you for being willing to allow me to challenge you and for playing ball and going down there. The reason I didn't accept the speaking as an answer was because you've already started to say no to that. You already made the decision to lower the number, right? So for me, that was already a decision that was just made, not something you're struggling to say no to now. And then you say, oh, I've got this epiphany moment. Bro, I'm also sitting here and watching you, and I saw the emotion well up in your eyes when you realized that divide. Yeah. Can you bring me inside right now and help me understand what this epiphany just caused you to feel?
There's a bit of a lack of congruence in a sense of, I'm an expansion guy. I love to grow. I love to build. Like, the competitive side.
Oh, yeah.
And even when I said it, I'm like, God, that just sounds wimpy. Like, like I'm going to say no to all these things. And it's like, well, hold on. No, we solve problems. But there was a part of me, I'll say on the other side, that was a little bit freeing to go, what if I didn't have to evaluate any new opportunities? And I said, like, we're closed for new opportunities. Because truthfully, let's be real. I don't have to go make more money tomorrow. Like that's not what drives me. It's not where I am. But what does drive me is the time. And as I reflect back to what we just talked about, is saying no to those is it actually creates some more space. Because how much of that time, as I was thinking through it, do I spend on a weekly basis? How many hours do I listen to new proposals and opportunities and all of these things that you do and go, what if I just cut those off and say, hey man, we're just not open for those anymore? Do I get 4 hours back? Do I get 8 hours back?
Or what if you just weren't actively looking and you passively accepted that if the right opportunity comes, you will know and you'll lean in?
That's
right.
That's where I was like, okay, qualify that with the sense of, okay, how am I going to evaluate those so that maybe it's not even Brian, part of the team. They evaluate to get through the gate. And then, and only then I can say, okay, we're going to look at it, but what's my evaluation process of that? So it's not yes. That's a time suck.
It is a time suck. Thanks for going there. I think that's something that so many high performers really, really struggle with. Dude, myself included, right? It's one of those things where it's like, I'm always looking towards more impact, more growth, more whatever, right? And what's interesting is I'm getting to a place where more doesn't, it's not because it's needed. More is expansion that aligns.
Yeah.
And so for me, when I can surrender to the fact that I've always had everything I ever needed, all of the opportunities, whether I chose to take them or not, that have aligned for me have been presented to me in my life. And whether I've been able to receive them, walk into them, lead them, or whatever is based on wherever I was at in that path. But what you just also brought to fruition is even at 46 years old, someone who's reached high levels of success in multiple industries, you're sitting here right in front of you saying, holy crap, I have everything I ever wanted right in front of me. And for the first time, I'm having to challenge the trash from my past, which, by the way, isn't necessarily negative, which has constantly conditioned me to chase more.
Yeah.
Right? What's come up on almost every conversation on this show so far. And look, there's a lot of ways that there's going to be similar patterns for high performers, but one that I have to say probably is on 80% or more of these episodes is how so many of our guests, myself included, learn to receive love, validation, and connection through performance.
Oh yeah. That's how we were wired.
You came up in a competitive household. Yeah. That started for you early.
Yeah.
Talk to us about what you were aware of in those early years in the competitive dynamic, how connected you felt, and what that ultimately taught you in your intellectual and emotional narratives that drove the work ethic that helped you reach these other levels of success externally.
For me, I share this story. This has been a lot of years of work of my dad's a psychologist, I'll just tell you. And I mentioned about the pastor. I remember his work ethic, and I'll never forget, there were times he would take me to the basketball court. We would just go in the gym, just the two of us, for hours. And I remember showing up on the soccer field and coming early and staying late for hours. But part of that I know was birthed because I was the younger sibling, 5 years younger. So it's like you want to be chasing older brother and playing with the older, bigger kids. But a large part of it too, people that know my story know that around 12 years old, I was playing AAU basketball, happened to be my pediatrician, was also our coach. And I remember going in there, and no joke, Brian, like I was so overweight, over 200 pounds, my blood pressure, my cholesterol, which runs in my family, I was so unhealthy, but yet this great,
at 12?
This great athlete. Imagine.
Wow.
Imagine these things, 12, going into 13, going to the pool and wearing 2 shirts because I was so fat and uncomfortable that I didn't want anybody to see. I knew what it looked like. But when you're an athlete and you can compete, you start to form your identity and you go out there. And so I know where my competitive drive came from. Thank God I had people around me, like my pediatrician, to say, if you don't change course, not only will you have diabetes and all these things, you're going to carry this the rest of your life. And I remember I probably shocked my entire family. I'll never forget, they joke about it today, where we went on turkey and chicken breast and baked lays and carrots and apples and like all this stuff. Yeah. And my parents struggled with the same thing, right? So it was a little bit genetic. It was also choices I made. And so my competitive drive was built out of, I know a place of to be seen and accepted in the world was like the only way. I didn't look great, had bad acne, overweight, all this. You can imagine, it's like, dude, that's not going to get you in with girls or in with friends, just being real. But sports was always my way. And when I learned to channel that energy, I'll never forget, Brian, when I was 14, I was waking up every morning, and through that 12, 13, I was starting to develop some of the habits. But 14 is where I really figured out my 8th grade year going into my freshman year. I'd wake up at 5 a.m. every day and run 3 to 4 miles before school, and just started to build the muscle of, dude, this is who I am. This is what I do, and I'm going to get in shape. And so then it was just adding fuel to the fire in the sense of, okay, I'm a great athlete. And that's where I had some tremendous success in the soccer field and why I chose soccer. But it was overcoming, realizing I look back to that today, it's still an anchor point for me that I go, if I overcame that, I've got the strength to overcome anything that comes my way, because that was horrible. Like that part, looking back at it, no kid should have to go through that and deal with those things. And I remember even having our first 2 kids, when I put on a bunch of weight, everybody calls it, the, what do they say? The hubby pregnancy weight or
sympathy weight. Yeah. Sympathy weight.
Dude, once I put that on, I hit a certain number. It was like, boom. It was just like, we are not going this way. And it's been, for me, just a driver of like who my identity is today, of what I want to pass on to my kids, the type of dad, the type of person I want to be. But it was all birthed from there. And then I would add having phenomenal coaches that saw things in me I didn't see in myself, that they would push me. And one of my best coaches was also the hardest today, that we often laughed. He couldn't coach today with the soft kids, no offense, the people that are coming up today. He would not be allowed. We would do somersaults on the pavement, and we would have to do suicides until we almost basically throwing up. That type of drive, and you realize you're built from that. And that's what's really created a lot of the identity of who I am today, where I lean in on a lot of stuff and I'm a little bit weird in the brain. I just like, just who I am.
Yeah. What I appreciate about your story as well is it's extremely accessible, right? There are lots of people who in either adolescence or adulthood have dealt with being overweight, being unhealthy, whether it's because of lack of access to the right foods or the lack of knowledge to get there, right? Like it's something that I think so many people can relate to. What I want to extend further, though, is even a lot of what you talked about is whether it's connected to weight or having an arm ripped off or a grandparent looking at you incorrectly, what it does is cause you to feel less connected to yourself, more disconnected from other people, more isolated, less worthy, right? And then so much control can come into a place that it starts to take over our lives. And we were talking about that earlier. You've been unwinding the control that drove so much success. What I would argue, though, is what's really interesting is when you got to that pinnacle of surrender, you recognize with your 7-year-old that you have another chance. You also had some of the most profound growth in your professional career in that same 5-year stretch as you were realigning your life. And the alignment in your life actually propelled that growth even faster than any of the actions you took prior. How quickly did you recognize and acknowledge that as truth?
Until you said that, man, I haven't thought of it that way. I was at a breaking point of being fired from a company and from somebody that I admired and looked up to and a mentor of mine. And I was at the point where I was like, dude, I'm not doing this again. Like, going through all of that. And it's like, what really matters? And it was like, it took that to shake me. Yeah. And I remember at that point, when the student is ready, the teacher appeared. And I had a good friend of mine who worked on Tony Robbins' team and all these things. And he focuses on married businessmen with kids. That is his specialty. And I remember, and Brian, no joke, I was like, holy cow, what I'm signing up for, I'll just say, was more money than I've ever invested in myself personally. Scary as hell, but I'm like, what am I signing up for? Like, who am I going to become? What are people going to think about me? What is my wife going to think? Like all these things. And I said, you know what? What I've learned is when I commit and go do those things, just like running and decide I'm getting in shape, like that's it. Like we're just not going back to that. Things happen. But I didn't think about it the way you phrased it. And I had to go through what I call this tunnel of, even though, Henry was 2 at that time, it's like, I just knew things had to get better. I wasn't going to go through and repeat that cycle again. I was like, but I had to become that person. And there were tools or things about myself I didn't know, didn't understand. And I spent, and if everybody listened, like I put it on a credit card. I didn't have the money to go do it. It's like, what's the other option? Because I'm not figuring it out by myself. Clearly something's not aligned up. I'm not happy with results that I'm having in certain areas. What's the worst that can happen? That's basically what I'm telling myself. Like, we're going to go do this. And to talk about a breakthrough, and even to this day, one of the people that I go to, and he's one of the few people I've led in my life that will speak some truth of like, it's been 5 years. And it's like, gosh, what can happen? 5 years seems like a long time. If I knew then what I know now, I would have done it sooner.
Yeah, and I think all of us can say that, but I also want to reflect to you. I'm proud of you for leading in when you saw the signs and the lack of alignment and the resistance, because too many people just decide they're going to push through that, right? Because it's the same as every other thing they've ever pushed through that seemed like it was resistance or seemed like it was taking away, but yet you found a way to not have it be empty. You found a way to have it be deeply connected to who you are and those that you care most about. And so thank you for that. I am really fascinated as well by your leadership development and your ability to recruit and lead teams, because that's something that you have truly demonstrated throughout your career. It's something you've been recruited for. It's something you're known for. You move people, right? And I've said for years, move people, move people. You move people at a very big rate. I also believe that we are a reflection of those that work with us or for us in some capacities. Yeah. So what reflection would we see for the type of boss that you are when looking at your employees?
You know, what I have shifted and what I would hope that they say, our team and anybody that's worked with me or, not on the team, even directly today, is that I left them better than when they started with me. When they started, they were here, and the focus on the entire family, you know, it's a Stephen Covey principle about the whole person theory. And I started to treat people as whole people, not team members to get results. And that shift of talking about their fitness, talking about their finances, and it's great that you make money, but you know, in the financial services industry, probably one of the worst at budgets and spending money. And they end up broke again, and they end up on this hamster wheel. And so when I got intentional about that in their leadership development, you know, Brian, I'm bringing in people like yourself, bringing in coaches that I was working with, bringing in mentors to say, I don't know it all. Do you know what I do know? Everybody I brought in my life that was a mentor or coach has challenged me, but they've made me better. So I'm going to bring those people in, and we're going to collectively work together to make this a leadership team that attracts the best people, that we're always known, and we do the work. We get better, and we lean in on tough conversations. Look, this for me, I just go back to sports. Every great coach always challenged me and pushed me beyond what I ever thought was possible. They always had a way of getting me to go, yeah, we can do that, and bringing that together. And I would tell you that then became, you're just known for creating leaders. And I had this epiphany a couple years ago of, and it was almost just a vision that came, and it was leaders that create other leaders that create other leaders. And I think a lot of people talk about leadership in themselves, and that's great. And this vision came to me as clear as I can remember, is I wanted to be the leader that created other leaders, that then they created other leaders. And it just became this legacy of, our industry is known for never doing that. No one does it. Like, they may take care of 1-2 people, but what if we could create almost a way that we created leaders? We brought out the best in them. We trained them up with the mindset and skill set to make them winners. And dude, I'll tell you, that has been what I believe is part of our success, is not only do we talk about it, but the results don't lie. The scoreboard doesn't lie. At the end of the day, if there are not leaders that have been with you now doing bigger things, that some of them promoted beyond me. They're at other companies doing huge things. Once you understand what people want and you can help them get there, you become an irreplaceable leader in their life, whether they work for your team or not. So I think it's changing here. And then speaking from here and connecting with people, just being more real, right? In conversations and authentic of, what are we really doing, man? We're helping people win every day.
So if the scoreboard tells the story, what are the metrics on your scoreboard?
You know what I've looked at is, and it's interesting you asked that, because I've been tracking health results. We've had a couple people in particular, I won't share their names, but that have lost 50, 60 pounds. We've had people that I know where their marriage was and the struggles they went through because they shared it with me, and they're still together today. I've got people that I know were paycheck to paycheck, like literally, and the stress that they were under, and they weren't there for their kids like I've been, and seeing how that plays out, and they're now spending more time with their family. If you start there, that's success. Like, let's just call it what it is. The performance, Brian, because I know people will want to know, like, where have they gone? What have they done? Okay, guys, like, we've built 4 teams now that have all done in excess of $1 billion in origination. Cool. Check the box. Only recently have I moved into a place, Brian, that I can accept that and hear that and go, well, like, we actually did that. That's really cool, because accepting that and realizing it wasn't just all me, clearly.
Yeah.
To me, there's no other business result. There's not another number. There's not another like paycheck number. And so when you shared that, what I can say now that I couldn't have said 5-10 years ago is the lives that are actually transformed and that I get to connect up with and hear, hey man, you changed my mindset around this. Hey, you got me to think about this. Hey, you got me to go buy life insurance for my family when I needed. You helped me buy my first rental property. Like, those are the things that I go, dude, like, how cool is that we get to do it? How much more can I do? I think a lot more. I think I was put in this role and opportunity and have a voice today to make an even bigger impact. And so that's where I'm leaning in, is you don't even have to be on our team anymore. That's my new vantage point. Have an opportunity. I'm going to share.
Well, I mean, the reality of it is too, as you lean further and further into the stuff that's clear, what that means is that you're also going to find a way to do more with less time and effort. to be able to continue to scale and expand so that you can be present with those that are most important to you. And it's your example that's also teaching so many of the folks that work for you a model for what's possible. And so you're not only doing that externally with conversations externally on your podcast in different pieces, but you do it internally within your business. I do want to go back to a phrase that I've like referenced a couple times about a state of your life where you were a professional athlete. You talked about it. You played professional soccer and you were at the highest level. You were in that world. You had great teammates, great coaches, some of the best conditioning that was amplified from this 12 to 14-year-old self that had to reconnect with your body and get healthy. Otherwise, you never would have performed there.
Yeah.
Help me understand the time that the professional soccer was actually in your life, what that meant to you, and what did you extract from that experience that's helped you since then?
So I share, this is the story for me that I go back to of everybody's got their journey, and I'll kind of walk through like what it was like playing in college and professionally. But what I don't want people to miss is really the lesson that I learned is if you watch soccer, I was a goalkeeper. Traditionally, goalkeepers are 6 feet or above. I'm clearly not that. And one of the shortest goalkeepers in professional league, one of the shortest goalkeepers in D1, top 25, top 10 team and all of that. And what I'd heard from so many people coming up was that I wasn't tall enough. I wasn't this, I wasn't that. And yet I made it. And I share that with you because today you're probably thinking, I don't have this, or maybe I don't fit the mold because of that. And had I believed those voices from those coaches and those people that said, yeah, you might get to play, but you're never really going to make it on a top team, or you might make it, but you're never going to see any minutes on the field. All of those things, limiting beliefs and people that would share things, that some of them actually had good intentions. Maybe looking out for me like, hey, don't go dream that big because what if it doesn't happen? And all the while, that just kept fueling. And who I am today, I say, is some people told me I couldn't do this, couldn't do that. And I'm like, man, try me. It's just kind of become this mantra. And I will tell you this is discipline for me was really forged from that 14, 15, 16 when I was running and losing weight. The next level of discipline, any D1 college athlete will tell you, keeping up with your studies. And I did quite well on that because I wanted to learn. I was kind of one of those guys. I realized, well, if I don't get this figured out, I can't flunk because I need to play. Like I want to play on Friday and Sunday. And so it was important to me, but managing time and practices and nutrition and all those things. When my friends are going out partying every weekend, there are choices you make. And I'll never forget through college and the guys that know me is like, I wasn't the big drinker. I wasn't the guy out partying. I was dead set on what my goal was, is people that said I couldn't make it to D1, I made it. Then there were people in D1 when I said my dream is to play professionally. They're like, you're not going to do that. I had made the national team pool years ago in U17. One of my goals was to get back on the national team. People said I could never do it. Never do it. Senior year, got back on the U23 national pool, got to train with the national team again. And so it was just this series of people telling me I couldn't do things. But what I would tell you is when you have belief in yourself, and it sounds cliche, but when you believe in yourself and you back it up with work ethic and you use that as fuel, when I would stay after or train in the Memphis hot summers, when it's sweltering heat, when you put in the work, you are building a muscle, and that confidence muscle that I can go back to today to go, hey, when stuff gets hard in a workout, stuff gets hard in life.
Yeah.
We all have these times, and they're different. You don't have to be a D1 college athlete to get the point of the story. You've done something in your life that you committed to and you stuck with it for a season or a period of seasons. To me, that's when discipline was forged. And then, Brian, I'll tell you, when I made it to professional leagues, I hate to break some people's hearts, it wasn't all it was cracked up to be for me, right? Like I got to start, I made it to the MLS and then played the A-League. It's like AAA baseball. And I realized, one, there wasn't a lot of money in it, and it was not that sexy back then at all. And then it just didn't drive me anymore. It was one of those that I realized for me after playing that season, I'd signed to go back, and I said, you know what? I'm not going to go back. I'm going to go finish my degree. I'd promised my parents. And that's where my shift into business, I started to have this real like pull. And I had friends, parents that worked in financial services and mortgage and real estate. For whatever reason, it just shifted to that. And it was like, okay, I've set out what I set out to do. Lots of different ways to look at that. I look at it now where I achieved the goal I had. My priorities shifted. Then fortunately, I met Nicole. We ended up getting married a year later. which was phenomenal. Best decision I could have made. And I think back to that. What if I had gone on? What would life look like? So I think God ordained all those seasons together.
I have no doubt. I always think everything is perfect. The timing is perfect if we actually recognize that. It doesn't feel like that always in the time, but you know what I really appreciate too is that you also had a lot of external noise that was telling you what you weren't going to be able to do. And I resonate deeply with that, right? Like I had lots of people viewing me through their lens of what they'd be capable of in my situation and immediately limiting me. Yeah. Many high performers have been in that situation, right? So it becomes, for lack of a better term, a chip on the shoulder, right? That saying that we're all familiar with. And a lot of times people are like, well, what do you just have to prove, right? You're proving something. And so many of us seek out to prove them wrong, but it's also to prove it to ourselves. You said yes, so you clearly resonate with that statement. Is there anything that you're still working to prove to yourself today?
One thing that I've carried with me, it probably stems back from being the overweight kid, in middle school and all that, is proving to myself that so many people told me in your 30s, you're going to fall off. In your 40s, man, it all goes away, Brian. Like you can't do kids and business and all these things. And it's almost like the same freaking chip on my shoulder of people saying it can't be done. And I'm like, watch me. I'm going to be in my 50s and 60s. And I don't know what that looks like, right? Like I'm clearly not delusional in the sense of, I think I'm going to be as strong and as fast as I was in my 20s. But what I do know is me showing up every day to work out sets a great example for my kids. It is something for me that drives me because I know the effects it has on the rest of my life is when that is out of balance. My wife even say it, man, if I don't go work out and I don't have that time for me, I am not the same person through the day. And it's not just energy, it's mood. It's just my frequency I'm putting off. It's not my best version. And so I think what I still have to prove to a lot of people, there's still some big goals and dreams that I really want a lot of people to realize they'll see in my story a lot of themselves. And again, I say this, you don't have to be a D1 or professional athlete or doing those things. Like you excelled in some area of your life, you had some success, and that doesn't negate or give you an advantage today per se. It's just how you use that. I've chosen to use those experiences and where I am today to go, I'm going to lean into those and have great conversations and create success. And you hear people talk about, I'm so grateful for the sacrifices my parents made. And one of the biggest drivers for me is they didn't work that hard for me to go this far. I think about what would my parents want? I was talking to my mom, Mother's Day this last weekend. And dude, anybody with their parents, they want the absolute best. They want to see their kids succeed on the levels that they never achieved themselves or they even thought possible for themselves as a kid. So I think about, dude, sometimes when I get down or I'm frustrated or I'm just like, why am I still doing this? Like, why am I still going as hard as I am? I'm very lucky both my parents are still alive, and I want them to be proud of like that little boy that like didn't quit, didn't take no for an answer, didn't listen to people saying I couldn't do this or do that, and be a great husband and dad and create opportunities for my kids to go way past what we did. So I think about that a lot, because with 3 kids, providing that opportunity for them, I've got work to do.
Yeah. I would imagine your parents were already very proud of you, regardless of where else you go or what else you do. I think you've demonstrated your ability to provide a stable family life, put in the work, go inside, and you're amplifying this through so many ways. I think you're a really cool leader in the sense that you have spread across different industries. You have experience operating at the highest level in business and in sports. You know how to collaborate with teams, but that also requires really good communication. And you've referenced conversations a whole lot of times. And I love that your book is actually called Conversations with Covey, right? It's a highlight of many of your guests that have been on your podcast. And you truly do have an ability as a podcast host to ask different questions. It's not the normal show. You get depth, you get connection. And that's one of the things that I loved about being on your show is I can literally count less than 30 of the over 600 shows that I'm like, that was a really good host. Right. And I don't say that with any disregard to any other show that I've been on, but like the elite people stand out. Where did you learn the importance of communication And as it relates to your book, Conversations with Covey, which is one or two of the individuals in that book that have really impacted your direction either today or moving forward?
So I go back to, I was really blessed with my dad being a pastor and a psychologist. I'll tell you, I learned two really important communication skills. One was you'd never hear my dad raise his voice. I mean, when he would tell us to do something, even in a you knew you need to do it, right? Like there was that ability to move you to go do things. But what I can appreciate looking back now is knowing how my temper can flare up, knowing how I can get heated and all of that, and recognize, man, he dealt with all of this with two boys and all the stress and going back and getting his doctorate and doing all these things and didn't raise his voice. And so I tell you, for anybody out there, communication, they say it's over 80%, right? The tone, the inflection, the body, like all those things. And that's the best example I can give you. Is like, you don't have to raise your voice and you're able to communicate with people. You're able to actually engage and their defense mechanisms stay down. And so being calm as you communicate. The second one, I've really learned through business, and I'll tell you some mentors of mine have really coached me through, is have the harder conversations faster and more open, be more direct in the sense when you feel like you need to lean out, you actually need to lean in.
Yep.
That was hard for me, man. Like as an early leader, leaning in on conversations with people, one, that were more experienced, older than I am, that I didn't want to have conflict with them. That was hard. But what I learned through those seasons and those lessons, it'll be point number two, is when you lean on that, that's how you build trust.
Yeah.
And think about, you probably respect people more when they're direct with you, when they actually say what's on their mind and what they're thinking, because none of us are mind readers. If that's how people want to be communicated with, why shouldn't we communicate that same way? So I think about your tone and your inflection and being calm, and then also being very direct and being in the moment with that person so that you're giving them not some lip service and not some like you're trying to manipulate the conversation, just being real with them in there. And learning that from my dad. And then also I've been blessed in some of our churches to have some of the most phenomenal pastors and people that over the last decade I've studied, whether it be John Maxwell or pastors out there that I go, how did they say that? How did they rephrase it? And I consider myself a student. And part of why I did the podcast was I wanted to improve my communication skills. Guys, outside of Toastmasters or speaking on stages or someone, I don't know any other way than doing over 100 episodes and then being a guest over about 200, I think we tracked the other day. You're going to find out really quickly where your communication skills are and how you can improve. And there is always areas for improvement. And so I would tell you that was the action that I took to follow it up. And then getting on stages, like that was really not something I wanted to lean into, but I knew I want to be the leader that I aspire to be. And I do. Got to walk the walk. It's time to go show up and go put the reps in. And like sports, if you don't do it, you don't improve. So last part of your question, dude. Well, one of them I will start with. It's very interesting how people come in our lives. And I go back to, I think God places them very strategically, right? We opened the podcast and COVID hits 2 months later. What do? Do we shut it down? Do we stop? I got this crazy idea that I'm going to reach out to some big A-list guests because what else are they doing? They're not on stages. They're not traveling to masterminds. So I reached out to Dave Meltzer.
A good buddy of mine.
And only fitting that we're talking about this is interesting enough. And Dave probably doesn't even know this, the amount of impact and influence where I didn't meet him for almost 2 years in person, but yet this man was able to impact and pour life and hope and just inspire me in certain ways. He would take a text, it would take a quick phone call, came on my show, which he was actually my first, what I would say, big guest that really opened doors for the future. It also gave me belief that I could have big guests like that. I could have people that are amazing and that would tell their stories. And so I picked Dave because not only did he inspire and encourage me, but he came on the show. The amount of people that have told me, wow, we didn't even know Dave who he was, but we listened to the show. Now we know who he is and just what he's doing in the world, not just from a business, but also, you know this, from just a philanthropic, just what he's doing.
Just from a human side, dude.
I got to go with him. And the second one, I'm going to go with Coach Burt because one of the first coaches I had here that actually challenged me several times to write my book, challenged me early on to start doing speaking and podcasts. And I pick him because he reminds me of a lot of the coaches I had in my life for soccer. And he's that coach, man. He's always just on you. And hey, what about this? Can we do that? Hey, let's tweak this. And he's come in and trained myself. He's trained our team. And I've seen his growth. And so I want to recognize him because you'll pick up in the book, his story is one that inspires a lot of people, but also seeing his personal growth of what he's been through and what a difference he's made and just challenged me. The book probably would not have been written, Brian, had Coach not sat down and said, you know what, you need to write that. We need to get that done.
No doubt that both David Meltzer and Coach Michael Burt are doing incredible work in the world. They've empowered and elevated a bunch of different people in two totally different ways and approaches, which I love and respect as well. They couldn't be more different people in so many ways, but they are so impactful in the ways that they are unique to them. And so I even appreciate the contrast of the answer that you just gave, because I just have a respect for all of those people. And especially when you can edify the impact someone else has had on you, it sings. It's like a different level of resonance for me when people can have the opportunity to be like, oh no, yeah, I actually impacted. Because you know as well as I do, we don't always get feedback.
No.
Where's an area in your life you could get more feedback?
You know what I just signed up for? I've realized this over the last several years is we all have a lid in certain areas.
I teach everybody to flip that lid, by the way.
Flip that lid.
I'm kidding. Just keep going.
And so here's where I am in this season. I've realized with the expansion of the brand and some of the companies and some of the things that we're doing, hiring people to help me build out things that they're really specialists in. And one of those was in the tax strategy and the planning. So on the financial side, I realized like even Brian, 20 plus years in real estate and mortgage and finance, like I only know so much. Hiring someone that's much, much smarter than I am, more than paid for itself. This second one, working with someone helping me with my brand and aligning up what we are doing so it all makes sense. Back to what we talked about earlier, where are my yeses and where do my nos need to be? And so we're doing a one-day workshop, immersive, going through all of this, man, all the way through the website and the newsletter and the blog and all the things that we're doing. And is it congruent with the brand that we foresee in the future? And that is where I'm really excited, because the group that I'm working with on there, they're phenomenal and they see things I don't see. And for most people, if you're building your brand, you don't see what other people see. Good and bad, by the way.
Yeah.
And
couldn't agree with that more.
Like, that's where I am, because I've realized, and I'm sure like you, Brian, you get these notes from people. And I had one today and somebody saying, man, I just listened to your episode last week with Damon, and I resonate with that. And they'd been to prison and they'd had like complete start over in their life in shambles. They go, I didn't know there were people out there. They've like come back from that and actually like done these things. I'm like, how did you find me? Like, I don't know.
Yeah.
You just go, man, if I reach the one, the one person and I can change their trajectory. That's why it's important to me to get this brand piece right, because it's not just about me anymore. It is so much bigger than even my family. It's like the way that the world works today with social and engagement. I didn't meet Dave for 2 years, and yet this man had an impact on me. Like we should never minimize that opportunity that we all have every day, that we wake up and we're alive, that we have an opportunity we've been given. And I owe it to everyone, including myself and my family and others, to show up as the best me and not hold shit back and just be all in on it. So yeah, I'm ready.
Man, I appreciate this conversation. I appreciate you. One thing that I did not factor in here, but I really need to hear, what's the best story you have from you being a bass player?
Oh, the bass player days. Man, so most people may not know this, but I played back in high school and through college. I'll give you two because completely contrasting worlds.
Awesome. Let's go.
Our band got selected to play down on Mud Island, like MTV back when it was big back then, and Three Doors Down and all these bands playing, and we got selected to go do that stuff. And I'm like, we're going to be a rock star.
That's awesome, by the way. Yeah.
But I'll give you the other side of the story too, because this is real life. Then I went on to college and I realized soccer is going to be my thing. You know, out of the band, don't do that anymore. Full circle though, I believe the reason that I learned how to play bass and had all those years is later on at our church, we had our first two kids. It was the way for me to plug in and playing in an old gymnasium and a new church and all that, moving to Franklin, the base actually afforded us and got us relationships with people. And so you can imagine in Nashville, we don't talk names, but I'll just say in the Christian space, I've been able to play with people that, Brian, like I look back now and I'm like, that is so cool. I can tell my kids.
Yeah.
And man, there's been times where people have shown up on a Sunday when we were playing and you would just look over and I won't lie, you'd be starstruck by someone. You're like, don't screw it up. So, yeah.
You light up in a different way when you talk about playing the bass, bro. It clearly moves through you in a whole different vibrational sense than almost anything else in your life. And so thank you for that. Thank you for sharing that. As we wrap up here, do you have any closing thoughts for the audience?
You know, what I share with people is there's something that I have continued to go back to. And I think a lot of times we want to complex life and make it all these things. And I came back, I was thinking about this weekend, Mother's Day. Simple rule to live by is love God and love people. And when you break those down, wherever your faith, whatever your religion, whatever that is, like having a relationship and realizing there is a higher power. Obviously, you know, I will tell you about Jesus until my face is blue. But I also think for people out there to realize that relationship is going to dictate who you are as a father, mother, son, daughter, business leader, all those. And the same is true when you love people and you genuinely show up with their best interests. Watch how your world changes. And you hear giver's gain and all these things people talk about. I can just tell you, the days that I lean in and that Brian shows up and I love God and I love people, those are my best days. When I don't do it, the same is true on the opposite side. And so if you are listening, man, love God and love people and become that, what we call lighthouse in people's worlds, that you might be the one person that day and the only one. It says something kind, smiles at them, and actually gives them a reason for hope and belief that they can keep going on. So never forget that.
Thank you, Brian. I really appreciate that. I'd like to add one little context to that because I think it's super important. I think the only way you can love God, universal law, whatever you call it, and love people is if you love you first. I also believe that whatever we call our higher power, whatever belief system flows through anyone who's listening to this, almost all of them show the greatest representation of that spirit, God, universal law, as the greatest representation of self.
Yeah.
So living in accordance with you is actually the best way to ensure that you not only love God, but that you get to love people. And Brian, my friend, I love you, and I am grateful for the way that you showed up today.
My friend, thank you. It's an honor. Seriously, what you're doing and being on this journey with you, there are very few people that I say, like, call me up at whatever time, whatever you need. The answer is yes. We're gonna do some big things. So thank you for showing up and doing the work that you've done, because without that, you're not the Brian that shows up today and impacts thousands and I believe millions of people.
Thank you, my friend. And for those of you that saw Brian jump in and flip his lid, he went deep. We got to understand all different elements of his life. The structure required for him to create the discipline to reach the level of success that he needed to prove it to himself and all of the naysayers along the way. But he also started to pay attention to the patterns and lack of congruence that existed and leaned in some really critical moments. His life is a great example of the greatest magnification, amplification, and exponential growth in his life actually came in the same 5-year period that he went inward and reconnected at the deepest level with himself and his family. He's a great example of what's possible, and that's all he wants you to believe, is that it's possible for you as well. He's the second guest today that we interviewed that referenced the word lighthouse. We can only understand light if we also understand darkness. But how do you become the lighthouse for yourself so that you can pave the way for others? It requires you to flip open your lid and scan your can. What you can probably tell by now is that I love telling these stories, but what I love even more is the impact that's coming from them. You see, we're on a mission to impact over 1 billion lives as quickly as possible, but to do that, we need you. See, we believe that moved people move people. And so all I'm asking is if you've resonated, connected with any of the messaging, please consider commenting, sharing, leave a rating and review. Thank you so much for tuning into Flipping the Lid. And if you want more information on the show, how to become a guest, how to recommend a guest, or any of the other details, head over to flippingthelid.com. We'll see you there.